Thank you so much for joining us today. We have folks from all over the world actually joining us, so we really appreciate your time. We have folks from all ranks of finance and HR departments, which is really exciting to see. A lot of manager, director level, as well as C-level executives joining us. My name is Rachel. I'm the Director of Content here at Jedox, and I will serve as your moderator this morning. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Ina and Rolf. Ina is Head of Development of HR Solutions at Better Decisions Group, also known as BDG, with nearly 20 years of professional experience in controlling and also people management at leading businesses, as well as in the public sector. Ina is very familiar with the challenges faced by both finance and HR. Ina is passionate about supporting companies and building a common language for finance and HR with customized software solutions. So that integrated business planning really blossoms from a simple idea to a very exciting reality. We're also joined by Rolf. Rolf is Chief Product Officer here at Jedox. He took charge of the company's worldwide market activities and business consulting in 2011. So Rolf has over 20 years of experience in business intelligence and enterprise performance management. Following his doctorate in economics at Goethe University, Rolf developed extensive conceptual and technical experience at major BI providers, both in Europe and North America. And he's really amassed considerable experience in the positioning, implementation, and also business outcomes of BI solutions. Welcome to you both. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
We'll start off by describing the impact and influence of unified workforce planning today. Then we will explore how the employee life cycle has recently evolved, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll also share with you a process framework, which will help you wrap your heads around really how to approach workforce planning from the perspective of, and with the goal of serving all stakeholders involved. And lastly, before Q&A, we will share with you the story of workforce planning at Zalando and how BDG and Jedox help them with reliable and on-demand FTE and cost planning at the click of a button. Organizations that are not properly resourced cannot compete in the market to achieve their full potential. This is really the central thesis of our discussion today. When organizations struggle to plan for and hire the right talent, one of the most critical factors for the success of a thriving business, as we all know, they face loss of revenue and they lose the ability to compete in the market. And human capital is more coveted than ever in the talent market that is increasingly global and ruthlessly competitive. As the pandemic wanes and remote work prevails, organizations are rethinking their talent strategies, they're reconstructing their employee life cycles, and really endeavoring more connection and less conflict between finance and HR teams. Organizations that close the data gap between workforce plans and FP&A are just in a stronger position to link up business and talent objectives and really to deliver on both. And with that, Ina, Rolf, I'll hand it off to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel. So just to give a bit of context why workforce planning is so important and pivotal in enterprise performance management, let's give a little bit of background what the different stakeholders in these planning processes are. So thinking about the executive management, they are of course pivotal for the health of the business. They have to plan about growth, profitability, and one of the most important drivers to have a successful organization is the workforce. So people are essential for this. Salary and wages are at the same time one of the biggest cost drivers in many organizations. And in the service industry, when you do not have the people, like you could see after the pandemic, business have difficulties like with many restaurants or airports where you could see it with a shortage of labor, you can't deliver the value creation that you want to give to your customers. And this is additionally, it's people who are driving the innovation within organizations. So you can automate processes, but innovate your business is very often depending on the talent that a company can recruit. So that is another important piece. And of course, organizations that are investing, how to get your funding and raising the capital for the organization, or when you're deploying the capital for the organization, all these ratios are measured. So what are the productive ratios? What are the cost per FTE and drivers like this? So executive management on a high level has to take care about having the best out of the workforce input that they can getting out of this. And of course, in modern organizations, when it comes, for example, to innovation or to creativity within an organization, diversity, equality, and inclusion is super important, because that's how you get creative and innovative teams together. And that's also something that executives and management teams in modern organizations are more and more looking into it. So basically, the executive team sets the frame of an organization wants to develop. And then it's kind of executed within the department head. So the second part, or the second group of people within an organization heavily involved in workforce planning, are the departmental heads, who have to recruit and take care that they have the resources available within their employees teams that are necessary for the executive plan. So they are responsible for resourcing the teams. They need to meet the goals and targets. They compete for talent and have to be quick and get the people in a competitive labor market to fill the positions that they want to fill. So two very important parts. And then, of course, they say kind of, who do I need, and work together with HR. How do I get the resources that I need on board to be successful?
It's true. So for HR, it's really relevant to understand the need of the business regarding the recruitment and development part. So what does the business need to achieve, which capabilities and seniorities are needed, and also in what urgency. So HR needs to create supporting hiring plans and needs to identify gaps which can be closed with certain learning and development parts to ensure the resources are available. It's also important to track and improve the engagement to retain talent, and also to minimize the regretted attrition, especially of the top talent. So as finance is in charge to create the financial plans, and on the other hand, it's also to ensure the profitability, they need reliable input in form of FTEs and costs. This is important during the budgeting phase, but also during forecasting periods. So as the personnel costs are often one of the bigger cost positions in the P&L, it's important to understand the FTE and cost development, and to be informed early when and why certain targets will not be met. So hence, finance needs to provide scenario planning to model and to be prepared for the future developments. So let's say workforce planning is crucial to deliver on business goals and fulfill the business strategies that we have spoken about. So, however, we often see in companies that workforce planning is a challenge. So there's a certain complexity in analyzing the current workforce structure, providing baselines, and also to predict personnel movements and FTE and cost developments, as said. Plus, there are certain people plans to provide from HR, e.g. the learning and development plans for business units, as well as the predictions for finance. So a disconnection between HR and finance slows or prevents hiring and developing the talent needed to excel. And finance and HR often speak different languages, I can tell. So finance is more data-driven, and miscommunication, as well as providing just gut feelings, can cause very much conflicts between the finance and the HR departments. So HR often, at the end, lacks credibility in the eyes of finance due to their inability of quantifying gut feeling. So we can say time is wasted explaining and clarifying a source of data, and finance and HR teams spend time on budgeting processes that should be spent better on achieving their respective departmental objectives.
Yes, and this is not only wasted time sometimes, but it also comes that an inaccurate plan is basically a useless plan. And that's something that happens over time, that between HR and operations, they are as Ina said, very often not in sync, and that changes consistently because there are too many dimensions moving. It's not only that people are not available, so you can't fill a slot when you want to fill the slot. Then people are terminating as not planned, and you have to fill more positions. Salary levels are changing, salaries are increasing. You probably haven't budgeted for this, and market demands are changing. So there's a lot of change that you have to handle, and without having the proper processes and tools in place, very often the answer is that you're starting to make a chaotic budgeting process by sending Excel lists. I need to have this and another requirement by email or Teams. You're sending afterwards. What are the requirements for something that you want to have captured in your hiring plans, which just makes the process very inefficient and you can't react fast. And that is in time of talent shortage. Really a problem because you have to be fast. When you have a good talent, a decision of which offer you can make, how quick you can make the offer, and that you can really confirm the conditions on this offer and stand for this, can make a decision. So sending out the offer one day later can mean that you are losing a candidate that would have been very good fit. And that means sometimes also, on the other hand, that you do hasty hiring decisions by just trying to get something closed, and at the very end, it was not a thorough selection process. And all that at the very end makes it important that the performance management and the performance and growth are really endangered when you're not handling the human capital hiring process in a proper way. And that also is even worse when you think about the economic conditions where we all are in the meantime. When you think about the economic uncertainty with inflation rates, you do not know where they are going. There's no crystal ball where you can look into it, and no one knows how the market will develop. But the most important thing for management in an organization is to be prepared when the markets are moving in a certain direction, which means the necessity to be able to plan for different scenarios. What if the inflation is 5% or 15%? What is when energy costs are moving into another level? What about scenarios of labor costs changing or prices that customers are willing to pay? All that has an impact on how big is your workforce? Are your demands and your requirements of people that you need to hire for your organization? So this is the uncertainty that comes a little bit from the outside, from the market. But then there is another uncertainty that comes from within your organization, and that's the new term that's used for the Great Resignation. Just thinking about the outcome of, for example, the 3 years of pandemic, there are a lot of people who haven't changed jobs, who have planned to change jobs, whatever, after 3 years with the company. There's really some kind of a jam of people stuck in organizations that are now looking for new jobs because they wanted to have a change for years now, but didn't do this in the enormous times of uncertainty. On top of that, there is a lot of competition in terms of labor. So other organizations are searching more prominently for new opportunities of jobs, so that people are willing to resignate much quicker than they thought, and they know what the alternatives out in the market are, so which is also reflected with the new talent market. So people are approached directly via LinkedIn, via headhunters with job opportunities. And finally, the silent resignation, where you have people within your organization that are not delivering with the same effort that they did probably pre-pandemic, just do enough to stay within the organization, which makes the whole planning for a certain productivity of your workforce really difficult to calculate. So this makes planning even more important. So the whole area of that uncertainty. And that, of course, reflects into the growth ambitions that an organization has, or the business ambitions. Can you achieve the plans with the workforce that you have? And with changing conditions, how can you plan for being successful there? And that all needs to a big need for integrated planning of an organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct. So to pull those strings together, it's really essential to drive this cross-organizational plans that mirror the unique contours of your business. And the siloed planning needs to be shifted into an integrated planning environment. And so it's super important to gain visibility over the entire workforce. You need to have data fast available, and you need a single source of truth. So when you know where you are, you can determine where you're going. And this is what we always say. So this means that you also need to identify the drivers of your planning for FTE and costs, and also to provide prediction and scenario easily, as Rolf just mentioned. So yet it's crucial to connect your workforce planning, cross-functional, and to feed into a common database. E.g., so for example, the FTE and cost predictions need to feed into the P&L and financial planning, or in terms of consultancy resource planning, for example, your drivers for your utilization, such as absences and so on, need to feed into your operational planning, which then provide the billable days for your revenue planning. So you see, this is all a integrated system, so to say, and you should make use of it. So as there's, of course, a lot of sensitive data involved when doing the workforce planning, you need to have it secured by the GDPR conformity. So having a system with audit-friendly security access controls is really essential. And yeah, HR people and leaders can, for example, have a detailed view on employees and position, while plans then will be provided on a more aggregated needed level for finance. Yeah, so this is really essential here.
Thank you so much, Ina and Rolf, for helping really widen the aperture for us so we can better understand all of the stakeholders who are involved in workforce planning and really understand what they're trying to achieve at the end of the day. And also really giving some perspective on some of the headwinds that are really impacting the planning process right now. I think after listening to the two of you, my takeaway here is that the talent environment right now can really pose an existential threat to organizations that really aren't thinking about workforce planning from a holistic and a strategic perspective. Gone are the days, really, if you think about it, where organizations can simply just shop for the talent they need to get the job done. I mean, now we're competing for talent not only with our direct competitors, but we're competing with tech companies, we're competing with folks in other industries, and we're reaching across borders to snap up talent in markets in which we perhaps have never hired or operated. So really just a really challenging environment for finance and HR teams in this workforce planning process. And HR and finance are also often operating separately and using different tools. And finance knows it needs to incorporate workforce costs, but they may not really know what to expect. And HR may lack a clear picture of what the organization can truly afford. So to your point, Ina, and Rolf, this disconnect truly threatens the ability of an organization to hire the talent they need to execute on their plan. I'm going to hand it off to Ina, who has some really, really interesting insights about how the pandemic has reshaped the employee life cycle and what this means for finance and HR teams. Ina, take it away.
Yeah, yes. So when looking at the employee life cycle, we can see that those processes here all have effects on the workforce planning, and especially with the recent changes coming from the pandemic and so on, we see that there are shifts in focus as companies set. So starting with recruiting, companies really have a deeper look into the cost lines when attracting and recruiting new talent. So are our recruiting channels really effective? Is our recruiting process efficient enough and fast enough? Yeah, can we hire the top talent we need in the time? It has to be, as Rolf mentioned before. So you cannot have a big recruiting process and then need a lot of time to hire. You will definitely lose the top talents, as they have so many possibilities now on the market. So it's really important to identify your strategic hires and to also open new talent pools to also with regards to the talent shortage that you really focus on your employer branding, also on LinkedIn, as mentioned before. And yeah, with those talents, if you get them coming from all over the world now, onboarding processes are really more virtual, and which is also very challenging to onboard and to build like personal connections. Yeah, so we see an increased risk of early attrition here in the onboarding part already, and especially if it's not understood as team effort. So there's a lot of shifts also in mindset regarding virtual reality, and to really use the new opportunities also provided with it. And then coming to the learning and development part, so what pandemic has taught us as well is that we need novel skills for the distance economy. So we need to be agile and resilient, and HR need to prepare the whole organization in terms of upskilling and reskilling their people. So building virtual networks is crucial, and such thing as mentorship and coaching programs need to be in place to really meet the higher employee expectation with regards to learning possibilities. It's not just providing me a training here and there, but really providing me the whole concept so that I can develop and that I see, that I can develop here in your company. And moving forward with the performance and progression part. So here in terms of performance and progression, HR need to support the leadership team in evaluating the talents and also in providing digital collaboration tools. Yeah. So with agile goal setting, the leadership team can ensure that talent is continuously working in the right direction in terms of strategy, and can also provide purpose as well as ongoing coaching here. So here, HR sets career paths and installs a fair and transparent compensation and benefit framework, which of course is also one major part to be included into the workforce planning. So along the whole life cycle, you basically need to include all those insights into the planning. So also when looking at the engagement parts, so when we have found our talent and developed the people and know per measurement of their potential, we also need to track their engagement, especially during the pandemic, as we said oftentimes now. More and more employee surveys were made to also ensure that we can focus on what to improve and to have our talents really engaged at the end. So this is especially needed to retain talents, to understand what do they need, what really has an impact on their engagement. So there's a lot of measurement here, measurements to do for HR to understand the impacts. And that's all at the end from a retention exit perspective. So with the changes over the past years, health and safety and well-being is a major topic to retain talent. So with the Great Resignation, as we said, we see higher attrition rates also for top talents, and we need to understand the correlations even more. So which measures will have the highest impact to retain our talents? And here, people analytics, of course, will be playing a major part, at least in the Europe region. In US, it's already in place. And we need this people analytics here to provide more insights and to really do not only the right thing, but the thing with the highest impact. So just to summarize this, as we can see, there is a lot of data generated in the human resources department, so in different forms and in multiple sources, also along the employee cycle. And those processes, those HR processes in the company, they have to be efficient and comprehensible for everyone involved. So decisions are also made continuously along the life cycle, and that influences success, and not just success of the process or the individual employees, but also the ultimately the success of the entire company. So collecting all those necessary personal data from these different departments and systems as well as keeping the data GDPR compliant is a really challenging task. So to create meaningful insights from the data to control your organization, you have to seamlessly integrate those multiple data sources into the company-wide integrated solution. So as you can see here on this slide, we can provide a lot of measures for the HR department, also per life cycle. But organizations, of course, need to focus on their relevant drivers to answer their specific question. And this can be, for example, in the recruiting part, is the performance and quality of your activities high enough? Are we fast enough? What is our time to hire per job family? And what is our gap to hire goal, for example? Or on the onboarding side, is our process efficient enough? So do we have a problem with early attrition due to our onboarding processes, for example? Is our ramp up total good enough to so that new hires are ready to perform in a certain amount of time? And this can go on. So there's I basically can tell you a whole lot of stories around every KPI here. So maybe just to conclude here at the end, and also to make this to the Great Resignation seem as a loop, it's really also for a lot of companies now really important to focus on attrition rates, to understand these as a core topic. So to have an early indicator about terminations, which will come also to include it into their workforce planning, to be able to really plan on resources available, not to mention, of course, the measures which we need to put in place to fight attrition, of course, against it.
Yes, and all these key HR KPIs that we looked at are, of course, having an impact on the overall company strategy. And with that, they are, when we are talking about a driver-based planning model, which we have typically in integrated business planning solutions, these are the drivers for the core business within an organization, which means on an aggregated level, also finance and the executives are looking at the same data. So that starts with the FTE. So how many FTEs do we have in different areas and in different roles? And what are the productivity indicators? So you put the FTEs in ratio to other KPIs from other areas. So FTEs, so whatever FTEs to sales reps. What are the number of customers per service rep that we have? What is the quota per sales rep? What's the product revenue per developer in your product organization? And so on. So all these things make a plausibility check whether the business model is meeting the expectations that we had in the original plan. And of course, this is matched when we talk about the employee life cycle with other KPIs of how is the workforce changing over time. So what is the fluctuation? What is the wanted and unwanted leaver and joiner statistics within an organization? What are the benchmarks? Is the capacity? Where are we over capacity? Where are we potentially under capacity? What is the ramp up time? So this are, again, coming back to the life cycle. How long does it take until an employee actually delivers the performance that we are expecting as a full ramped resource providing working for the organization, and what is needed in terms of costs, which bring us to the monetary reflection of the same number. So you can, of course, not only just look at the FTEs, but also at the salaries and what is the total cost of your workforce. How does this change? How are our benchmarks there? So compared to peer in reviews in the market, what are salary levels that are normal, and what are the hiring costs? What are the training costs and involved in this? And all of that is basically for that very large block of in a typical P&L of HR related costs needs to be monitored to ensure the productivity of an organization.
Thank you both. I mean, just after looking at these lists of KPIs, I mean, finance and HR teams are certainly tracking a lot of them. And they definitely provide super illuminating data points on what is happening throughout the employee life cycle and what the impacts of those activities are on the business and the financial position. And what organizations really need at the end of the day is a blueprint that allows them to develop a comprehensive and holistic plan that incorporates, again, all stakeholder objectives here. And after leadership at an organization defines their objectives, you can think of a software planning tool as kind of the glue that binds, I suppose, the plan together. Rolf is going to go through the Jedox workforce planning framework. So this is a planning process that works across the entire organization. And we'll start with, from left to right, we'll start with defining the corporate objectives and ending the cycle by how finance and HR KPIs are met through this framework. Rolf, would you be so kind as to take us through this framework?
Yes, absolutely. And this is really giving a structure of how you can address an integrated business planning process with a specific focus on workforce planning. So let's start with the corporate objectives. Basically, the corporate objectives of an organization are the core of an FP&A model where it comes to revenue, cost, and close, which is close to a P&L statement. So when you look at revenue, it's how much do we need to sell across the products in different SKUs, in which regions, which product need to evolve over the planning period to meet these objectives, which we are after. And then you combine this, of course, with the company strategy. So is there any change in the organization, like mergers or acquisitions planned? How would that change the patterns on the revenue side? Are there other decisions made in terms of investments or other board relations in there? And then other corporate goals, of course, are reflected from the corporate side. I talked in the very beginning about DEI, and also ESG topics are coming more and more, which are not purely financial, but are giving an important framework and important guidance of how the entire following planning process within an integrated financial planning process is affected. So, and from there, this is then when this plan is set, where basically from the FP&A, the integrated business planning starts, where the workforce, the corporate requirements are given into the different departments. And that means where each department has to define what does that mean? What do I have in terms of workforce infrastructure available and productive to meet the requirements that I get from my corporate objectives? And that can be on the revenue generating side, that we like sales, marketing, customer success. So what is needed in terms of workforce there? Which resource requirements do I have? On the production or services side, it's more what do I need to develop the product, the roadmap to earn the revenue. And on the administration side, it's HR and finance. So what are the supporting processes needed to deliver the revenue expectations that are there? And finally, infrastructure teams such like IT or support that provide the different areas that are coming from this corporate objectives. And under these requirements, that is the wish list that comes from the workforce. That comes the next handshake over to HR, where it comes to how are the HR department actually fulfilling the requirements that are coming from the different departments. And that's where then now HR can start with the planning of the workforce. So HR apply the expertise to perform the key functions both in finance and HR. So they start with the finance KPIs. So what salaries are needed, what compensation is needed, which benefits do I have to pay to get the roles and keep the existing employees within the organization. And this, of course, also, again, like the markets, varies very heavily regionally or by seniority or by education and other factors. And that's where the finance and the HR departments are the experts who can provide this information. Then the employee life cycle costs are mapped to this. We talked about this. What are the different costs over the course up to with ramping up people, with keeping people in the organization. So to come up with what is the cost framework for social costs and additional payments and monetary components that have to be budgeted for within the organization. And finally, this moves then into the more the planning and go forward area of organization, which is the financial analysis and planning capability. So really where it comes to closes back the circle to FP&A, where you the results of everything that you have budgeted before can see in KPIs and on department level, on cost center level, with the P&L and operational plans. How are the ratios? How to monitor this over time with dashboards, with the understanding of having insight into KPIs. And this is happening on the financial side as well as on the workforce planning and collaboration side, where we then can see how the different parts of the planned changes within the organization are executed, to see how is the recruiting progressing, and having also the appropriate workflows in place to have a proper and non-chaotic hiring processes in place that we talked about in the beginning of the webinar. And all of that is a theoretical framework, which gives a lot of structure and is proven to be working to introduce systems like this and building stepwise for an integrated business planning with a workforce focus in there. And now it will be super interesting how this works in reality, because that's a lot of theory. And Ina will give us an overview of, I think it's the biggest European revenue, in terms of revenue, biggest revenue company in Europe, founded in the 21st century. So talking about high growth, which we did in the beginning, this is a great example. And Ina will give us a little bit of insight how Zalando has implemented a lot of what we just talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Zalando is really one of our biggest customers here also at BDG. And I worked here as an HR representative, also together with the finance department. And we improved actually the workforce planning. And I will give you now some insights, and we see that the whole framework Rolf just provided is really working. So before we had the new workforce planning in place, it was like a process that finance was asking for numbers, HR was not able to provide, because as we may have seen in the life cycle, personal movement is really complex, and you can not just provide information without having transparency of those processes. So when we build the new process, it looks like this. That the planning process now starts, of course, with the company strategy. This is really important because it need to then be broken down into the business areas to set targets. Yeah, and those targets Zalando then translated, or the the business areas of Zalando then translated into a long-term financial plan, as I call it. So a plan for the next 5 years with certain relevant KPIs which were set. And then at the same time, we also started the strategic workforce planning process together with the business areas to discuss which size and shape the organization must have in order to fulfill those financial goals at the end. As Rolf said, talent is crucial to fulfill the strategies and the goals. And so we need to know what is needed, also what is there, also having a look at the baseline, but also what is needed. And so here we also designed a shift in job families needed, yeah, and team setups. We discussed team setups and also for new products or new markets. So to really also understand the speed business areas are needing to fulfill their strategy. So whether it is a long-term shift we can do, or it's a major adjustment we need to be doing very fast in the next year, for example. So the strategic workforce plan was to verify actually the long-term financial plan, and both plans set the so-called cornerstones. Setting the relevant KPI targets for the upcoming budget round for next year. Also then having the cornerstones also for the long-term view, really every time reflecting, are we still on track or do we need to adjust plans and strategies. Budget round starts with HR providing the workforce FTE and cost baseline via a BDG solution, which we built in Jedox. This was really a game changer because you have in HR so many systems, so many data sources as we see, right? The recruiting system and the performance system, and every system has a certain amount of data which you need for workforce planning, especially the core HR system, the pre-system like SAP, Personio, whatever you have in place in the organization at Zalando, it's SAP. And there's a lot of information already in there, and our solution just with a click of a button has this baseline already set. So we have all the employees and an open position already included into the baseline. And then also we build in certain global parameters like salary increases or attrition and inactivity effects, as well as prediction of new entries according to the process or progress of the recruiting department was provided as well. So there was a lot of global parameters we already put into the system. So a cost center owner does not need to plan on those global parameters anymore, but just plan certain shifts compared to those parameters on an employee level. Or he needed to add a certain position as already discussed during the strategic workforce planning. So in this case, what HR at Zalando achieved was that the HR business partners were really capable of supporting the cost center owners and the financial controllers at the same time. They could have a view on real-time aggregated dashboards. So they were all involved already during planning. They do not needed to wait until everything was aggregated 2 weeks later or so, as before. They really had a view on the planning stand. They could discuss and still can, of course. And so they plan and align in a very, very short time. So yeah, then after this budgeting phase of workforce planning, we then submitted those numbers per cost center to finance with a push of a button. There was no, as I said, no aggregation needed anymore because Jedox systems here were in place. We have the HR system and the finance system. You can just push a button and then the HR world translate into the finance world and to certain P&L lines. You do not need to think about this as an HR person anymore. And then finance could start then afterwards the allocation process, feeding the P&L and the contribution margin framework and so on. I'm sorry. So to sum it up, so we have really shortened the workforce planning time immensely by at the same time delivering more reliable FTE and cost predictions for the finance department. As said, personal movements are really complex, and if you can explain why FTEs are changing and costing the same or the other way around, if you provide those insights, and if you can explain from an HR perspective, what you can with a software solution we have implemented, they were really discussing on the same eye level. They understood, so finance understood, okay, where does changes come from? Do I need to incorporate and or adjust certain revenue lines for that, or does it have an impact on other positions? And also for HR, they could discuss with departments on talent strategies, not on the numbers anymore, which numbers are correct or what is the source of truth. It's like really going into the discussion and working together on the business strategy, and then, as said, also developing those talent strategies. So yeah, this I could tell a lot of more things, but maybe, yeah, that's a good slide now to just summarize. So what we achieved, and not only with Zalando, but with a lot of more customers using our solution here from BDG and in Jedox, the whole workforce planning process becomes more efficient. As we said, we have the data sources all integrated into a one tool. It's a push of a button. You can shorten your planning time. In this case, it's all integrated, so finance controllers can have a view already during your workforce planning without seeing sensitive data, but on an aggregated view can compare it to their target settings and so on. And also, due to the whole global parameters we have integrated into our workforce planning solution, it's really agile. So you can adjust a few parameters and see the outcome already. So you can do a very simple scenario planning in this case. Yeah, if we see there's a change in revenue, maybe we need to adjust salary increases. What effects do we have if we just decrease it by 1%? You can have it with a click of a button and not calculating anymore. And as an HR person who's not so into numbers and calculating, this is a really helpful system at the end. And also, yeah, here to mention also the continuous point. So we not only integrated a budgeting workforce planning process, but really a rolling forecasting system. This is really important also for finance ever, but also like from workforce point of view, as there are so many changes and as there's so complex movement, people deciding to leave or to enter your company or going into maternity leave or whatsoever. There's a lot of change going on, and if you track this continuously and also continuously calculating and doing a prediction on your FTE and cost development, finance is really able to provide insights on how the business is now going forward. So if we, for example, just save money at the moment because we cannot recruit for the talent we need, we can take the money and invest in other areas, maybe to now focus in this or that market. We may have just focused in Q3, we may now focus in Q2 or whatever. So there's a lot of more room for decisions to based on a reliable FTE and cost forecast.
Thanks so much, Ina. I think, reflecting on what you said earlier and what we talked about as sort of the central thesis of our discussion today, which was, resource organizations that are under-resourced or mis-resourced, just really, they won't be able to compete in today's market. And given all the dynamics and the shifting dynamics around the employee life cycle and how much more really complicated the people side of businesses these days after the pandemic, I think this is a really great way to summarize how important it is to have really advanced planning tools that can really empower organizations to achieve all of these things, the efficiency, the integration, the adaptability, and on a continuous basis. So thank you for sharing that with us. I've been sort of lurking in the background here looking at questions for today, and there's one that has actually come up in a couple of different forms. So I will start with this one here. How long does it take to implement this type of solution? We've talked a lot about today about the capabilities, and it sounds probably very complex. So I'm interested in both of your perspective on sort of how long an implementation traditionally takes.
Maybe I could just start, Rolf. You please add. So in general, the planning and reporting solution itself can be implemented in a short time. For example, if you use a standard application as the BDG1, as mentioned before, which we have built here as a BDG department in Jedox. So if you have a pre-built framework with standard functionalities and processes already in place, you're very fast in implementation. So we have around about 20 days implementation time if you're just really using the standard application, of course. If you're an organization which is more on an enterprise level and has more more customization needs, of course, time will go up. But at the end, really depends also on the data integration part from the organization side.
Yes, and this fits perfectly with our saying when we say, how do we do a Jedox project? Think big, start small, execute quickly. So you can get very, very great results within a very short time frame, and especially when, like our partner BDG has the solution for this framework, how we can use different pre-built models, like we have some, or BDG has the HR model out there, which again, on top of this, shorten the time frame. I would add to the execute quickly, and adapt continuously, because I think that's another important one, that we've learned how much change we had in the last years, and this is going on like this, which means there's not a solution that is ready at some point in time. It will always there will always be need to be adjusted, and this is possible with that approach as well.
Thank you, Rolf. One other question before we adjourn for today. Organizations are obviously already using HR tools. So can you help us understand, Ina, do those tools become redundant or obsolete? Do they integrate? Just help us understand how this workforce planning can fit into existing systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so HR pre-systems will always be part of your tooling landscapes, as HR needs certain special tools to deliver on processes such as recruiting or performance measurements. So there is no tool which has it all in one, so as it would be a simple way too complex, but plus also no multi-tools does provide a complex planning functionality or if analyzing capabilities are there, then just in a limited way. So when implementing a planning and reporting software in HR, you will integrate all those pre-systems or your data sources, basically, which are needed for the planning and cross-functional analyzing into those software. So your daily work will still be in your tools, which best fits your daily needs, and the reporting to the management will be done from this one software, which merge the data to actionable insights, actually.
Great, thank you so much. Rolf, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and also this fits perfectly to the Jedox strategy. We are providing a performance management platform, the most adaptable in the world, which means there are connectivity capabilities to basically any other source system. And this is exactly what happens. It's the glue between the different pieces where you get new KPIs, new insight, new information within the organization to put this into that one big picture that's mirroring what you're doing within an integrated business planning view of your organization. And that's where we can very quickly and easily adapt additional sources. So not everything will be, there's nothing that will be getting redundant. So probably there's the one or other Excel sheet, hopefully, that will be eliminated. But that's not a system. Yes. But when you have additional information sources, integrate them when it's useful to combine this with the other information. And that's exactly what Jedox is great in, and which we call, when we talk about FP&A, to extend it into different areas and being the bridge to bring that big picture together, the holistic view of the organization.
Thanks, Rolf. Well, I think that's it for today. This deck will be available for download from the platform, so feel free to do so. If you'd like to reach out to Rolf or Ina, their contact information is enclosed. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and we hope you learned a few new insights about workforce planning. And we'll hope to see you on a next future webinar for Jedox. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.